Hey folks, this is Kelani. This week we got our first taste of what Timewalking raids could offer, and honestly I was a little bit disappointed, though when I sit down and actually look at what Timewalking raids are, I realized why I was disappointed. So let's have a look at the 4 major reasons why Timewalking raids might not be such a great idea. So one of the most common points you'll hear about when people bring up Timewalking raids is that people who weren't able to experience the raids of golden days long gone will be able to jump in and experience it as if they were there so many expansions ago. And while that's a fantastic sentiment, it might not actually be as grandiose as we remember when we have access to so many dungeon and raid encounters which are complex and engaging. Going into the Black Temple Timewalking, I was pretty stoked. I knew how most of the bosses worked, when you don't kill them in one hit, but I don't think I quite realized just how bland most of them actually are. Typically, you only find 1 or 2 real mechanics on each fight, and they don't even happen that often. That leaves the majority of your time spent on these bosses just happily whacking away at another loot pinata. It felt way too reminiscent of the looking for raid difficulties where you might die if you do something horribly wrong, but for the most part you just have to maintain some semblance of a rotation and the boss will eventually die. That's all fine and dandy, that's how it was back in the day for the start of the raid, but the part that frustrates me is the eventually part. These fights can last for a long time, but it's not because they're difficult in any meaningful way, it's just that the bosses have a lot of health and you don't really do that much damage when scaled down. The time you spend on these bosses is pretty damn boring when you combine the lack of engaging mechanics with the sheer volume of health you have to chunk through with your toothpick weapons. The bosses are pretty boring overall, so is it a particularly good thing that we can go back and experience them from the progression point of view? Compared to the raids that we have today, they're not all that special when you take nostalgia out of the picture. The only major exception would be Illidan, but having to drudge through everything else to get to him makes me really not want to bother on any other characters. Illidan is pretty much the opposite of most of the other bosses. He'll give you a run for your money even if you're an organized group. He's definitely a step up from anything else you face in the raid, which also means that the difficulty curve is pretty steep, which might discourage a lot of the players who this event is seemingly for. You could argue that it's just the Black Temple. That's a little dull to begin with, but almost every raid from the same era would have the same problems. They're all dated raids. They were good in their day, but they don't look anywhere near as shiny when placed side by side with some of the more recent encounters. That means any raids from Vanilla, the Burning Crusade, and maybe even the Wrath of the Lich King wouldn't be the best candidates for revisiting, even though they are some of the most popular times in World of Warcraft history. On the flip side, the most comparable encounters will probably be from Warlords of Draenor, but I'm pretty sure that content is a little too fresh in some people's memories to add into Timewalking. I think I remember the dev team wanting to keep Timewalking to at least 2 expansions before the current, so we might actually see some Warlords of Draenor Timewalking stuff added when we get into the next expansion, but for now, that's off the table too. So that makes me question why, out of all the raids between Vanilla and Mist of Pandaria, would they go with the Black Temple? The story tie-in is the most obvious reason. Illidan is back to have fun with us, so let's go back in time and see how we beat him up when we probably shouldn't have. My main problem with that reasoning is that we already saw plenty of that during the Illidan questline to retrieve his soul and bring him back to life. We've been guilt-tripped so many times about the whole accidentally killing him thing that I'm starting to feel a little less sorry about it. So the only real connection we have with the current happenings is that Illidan is the forefront of both timelines. He's the last boss in the Black Temple, and now he's the chosen child of the Prime Naru. You can also say that it's just for fun and Timewalking doesn't have to tie in to what we're doing, in which case I would say why not pick a raid from one of the newer expansions to test out the Timewalking raids. Even Wrath of the Lich King raids would probably be significantly better when it comes to older content. To me it feels like Timewalking raids could just be another looking for raid type of content where you spend forever killing bosses that don't really pose any great threat to you. I hope it doesn't kill the overall excitement of Timewalking raids, as I would love to see some others added in for the other expansion's Timewalking events. Now, the trash, on the other hand, in Black Temple, is a different beast. That's something that will really test your raid's patience. Half the trash mobs are more powerful and more annoying to deal with than the bosses because they have ridiculous debuffs like a 30-second root. Good luck, have fun? When you compare the Looking for raid and the Timewalking raids, it seems a little odd that you can't queue up for the Timewalking Black Temple. You have to form your own group and then queue specifically in Shattrath by talking to a Timewalking NPC. This may be an attempt to just keep all Timewalking events in their respective areas, like how they placed NPCs in appropriate locations to the expansion's Timewalking event. The Burning Crusades in Shattrath, Wrath of the Lich King in Old Dalaran, Cataclysm in Orgrimmar and Stormwind, and the Mists of Pandaria was on the Timeless Isle. Maybe it's an attempt to encourage people to go back and finish up anything they may have left over from those expansions, whether it be a reputation, some quests, or even dungeons and raids. You're already in the right area to complete some stuff, so why not go and do it? It's definitely a nice incentive, but it seems like an extra hoop to jump through when any groups who wish to queue up as a group could do so through the queue system like Looking for Raid. The only real difference is that the Black Temple scales from 10 to 30 players, and if you want to take in your small knit group of 10 people, you can do that without worrying about randoms being able to queue into your group and being automatically thrown into the mix to get up to that cap of 30 people. I guess that is a nice thing. Guilds can go at their own pace and play it as they want to without outside interference, and it's not that hard to find a group that just wants to go in, pull some bosses and try and kill them in a timely manner. But when some groups will auto-accept everybody and queue when they have enough people, it makes me question if there's really any difference between that and being able to just queue into the encounter itself, except needing to be in Shattrath. One great thing about the Timewalking Black Temple raid is the gear rewards have been bumped up to a decent item level, meaning they can really be a great source of gear if you're lucky enough to get some loot. The item level of gear rewarded from every boss is 900, making it some of the highest item level gear available in the game through any source that doesn't require a minimum item level. The Tomb of Sargeras raid obviously drops higher gear, but requires a very high item level compared to the actual drops sometimes, and High Level Mythic Plus can drop higher gear, but again requires a pretty beefy item level to get into any of the groups running those keys. When you can queue into the Black Temple at any item level and not really have it matter due to the item scaling and still be rewarded with 900 item level loot, that's pretty appealing. The only real problem with this is that the Timewalking events are only up for a week, and it can be months before they come back around. That means it's not really a reliable gear catch-up mechanism in a time when gear catch-up would be very much welcome. There seems to be a lull in item level around the 900 mark, and the Timewalking Black Temple does a good job at filling in some of those gaps to bump your item level up high enough to have a decent chance of getting into some of those Tomb of Sargeras pug raids. We won't see TBC Timewalking again until mid-September, meaning we'll have a gap of about 2 months where once again it will be a bit more difficult to break that 900 item level barrier on any characters left behind or any new alts. This would be alleviated if other Timewalking events had raids tied to them, and having a broader rotation of older content could also allow us to better appreciate how encounters and raid design have progressed over the years. I wonder if we'll have the Black Temple again when the Burning Crusade Timewalking rolls around in September, or whether they will also rotate the raids available with each Timewalking event. It could be a nice way to pace out the older raids, and when one does come around again, it would have been quite a while before we'd seen it in Timewalking form. Even if all the other Timewalking events had raids and we had a Timewalking event every 3 weeks, which would be rewarding some decent loot, I wonder if we wouldn't be better served having a more permanent source of gear catch-ups. The Timewalking events would still be pretty cool if they continued to award prestigious items like the Warglave's Transmog for Demon Hunters, along with a large chunk of Timewalking badges you get for completing the quest and the entire raid. All in all, I don't think the Black Temple shows us the true potential of the Timewalking raid system and think it may have been a poor first choice, but I'm sure we'll see it grow and expand into another great pastime as more and more raids are added. We'll have to see how things pan out in the future, but that's my thoughts and feelings after going through our first Timewalking raid. If you have any questions or queries, please leave them in the comments section below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible, or hop on over to Discord. We have a Discord server at discord.gg/Kelani, great place to come ask questions or just hang out. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.